Hey everyone, Farmer Dan here. Just finished meeting customers, milk customers at one of our drops, and so I'm driving, got a few minutes here, thought I'd jump on and just kind of talk a little bit about something that I've been learning and exploring, and just gonna ask a question, and I'd be curious at what everyone's thoughts are, and perhaps your view will change by the end of this. But I was asked a little over a year ago the question: is gold or wealth or money good, bad, or neutral? And I would have said neutral. But as I've started to just really listen to some different things and kind of study scripture a little bit in Genesis, I've come to realize that it's actually good, and it's good because God calls it good. Did you know that the 8th time that God called something good was gold? He created the heavens and the earth and the land and the sea and the stars and the animals and man, and called it good. But the 8th time he said, there's gold in that land, and the gold of that land is good. Which really is kind of an interesting kind of thought when you think about it. God put gold in the Garden of Eden when there was only 2 people. They literally had everything they needed. They lacked nothing. There was nothing to buy. Again, it was just the 2 of them. So why would God put gold in the Garden of Eden? Well, I propose to you that it's because God wanted us to know, especially God's people, followers of Jesus, to know that wealth and money is good. In fact, the first time that wealth is mentioned in a positive way in Scripture related to a person was Abraham. It not only said that he was rich, it said that he's very rich. So rich, in fact, that when Lot got captured, he armed all his servants and went and rescued Lot and his family. That's a pretty powerful person. And in fact, the ruler of that land wanted to give Abraham money, and Abraham refused it and said, I don't want it to be, I'm paraphrasing here, but I don't want it to be mistaken that my wealth came from anything but from God. And so that really just starts making you think a little bit differently about money. I know for me, growing up in the church, you kind of have this idea that wealth or money is inherently evil or wrong. In fact, we shouldn't desire it. When I think it's just the opposite. In fact, I think the enemy's been very strategic in getting believers to believe that lie. Somehow poverty is piety, which is just nonsense. And You won't find that in Scripture. You can pull certain scriptures out and isolate them or not really look at them in the complete context of what they are and come to those conclusions. But if you look at Scripture as a whole, I don't believe you're going to find, well, I know you're not going to find that wealth or money is evil. It's, money is talked about is the most talked about topic that Jesus talked about, which is, it's really kind of hard to imagine that, but out of all his teachings. But so for me, I've started down a journey of creating a generational wealth, not because I want some mansion on a lake somewhere, or vacation home, or a $500,000 boat or yacht, or not that those things are bad, but my goal in pursuing this is to give my family options. Right now we're exploring different health issues in our family, and it's probably going to require us to build a new house. So that's certainly a motivating factor for me. But beyond that, I don't want my kids, my grandkids, and future generations to ever have to worry about starting from scratch and skimping and worrying about how they're going to pay bills. And Proverbs says a wise man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, and I don't know about you, but I don't see that in the church today. I'm not saying it's not there at all, but I think it's, a lot of Christians have just become complacent and not really understanding or recognizing the abundance that's all around them, the abundance that I believe God has for them. They lack awareness of that. But I think it'd be really cool to be able to buy my kids their first house. I'd love for my kids, I know for Ava and I, when we first got married, it was tough. It was just hard times of starting a new life, and we were self-employed and doing remodeling and side work and things, and times were tough. And I just, I don't want my kids to experience that. I want my kids to just be able to focus on being married and starting a family and raising a family, and not stress about money and buying groceries and what if this happens or that happens. And when I say all that, I don't think our trust should be in our bank account at all. Ultimately everything we have, every breath that we breathe is from God. Every desire, every good gift is from God. So I never want them to never understand that it can all disappear in a blink of an eye. That I don't want their hope and faith to be in finances. But I do think it would be just a massive load off their shoulders to be able to just focus on building a family and the purposes and plans that God has for them as individuals and couples and as a family, and just be able to live out those purposes. So that's one of my biggest motivating factors in doing this. I don't want my kids growing up to be spoiled rich kids. You know, we certainly teach them what working hard looks like and feels like, and being diligent in our work and doing a good job and doing everything for the glory of God. And I think there's value in that, for sure. But boy, if they don't have to start from scratch like I did, they'll be miles ahead. So I would like to invite you on this journey with me. That's why I created this YouTube channel, was to explore wealth and money and business from God's perspective, from a biblical perspective, using biblical principles. You know, the neat thing about principles, biblical principles, is it doesn't even matter who uses them. You don't even have to believe in the principles for them to work. They work no matter what. And I've always loved the idea of business and doing business God's way. And when you start going down that road and just you just look at Scripture differently and things differently. You know, I grew up thinking, you know, it was wrong to ask for money, or, you know, even if I did, you know, work for somebody, I had a hard time asking for money, and I made it seem like it was a good thing, right? Like I was just being nice, but in reality, I just had a really hard time asking for it. And, you know, you start looking at Scripture, and just there's some really shrewd businessmen, like Joseph. You know, he was ruler, second in command and highest in command if Pharaoh wasn't on his throne. And he was blessed to have that abundance, but he didn't give it away. He sold it. And then when they ran out of the money, he took cattle and livestock as payment. And then when that ran out, he took the land. It's just a different way of thinking. And there's nothing wrong with asking for money. But I want to invite you on this journey with me. Let's explore Scripture, the Bible, what God has to say about money and wealth, and talk business and principles, and just follow me on this journey from struggling each month to living in the abundance that I believe God has for me and my family. And it really starts with a mindset shift. You know, if you think money's evil, it doesn't matter how hard you work, how much you try, you'll never be successful, because subconsciously you think it's evil or wrong. So the first thing we can do is just really dive deep into our mindset and how we how we think and believe about money. So that goes back to my first question. Leave a comment. Let me know what you would have said at the beginning of this, and if you agree, disagree, or maybe your mindset's shifted and maybe you see it differently. But love to connect and chat and hear everybody's comments. Good, bad, ugly, let's talk. This is a friendly environment. We can agree to disagree if you don't see it that way, and that's fine. But hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. Let's connect, follow along. Let's see where this journey takes each of us. So for now, Farmer Dan signing off.